The school capacity charts are utilized as part of the growth management process by the Howard County Department of Planning and Zoning for new residential developments. The board and Howard County Public School System is required to update the school capacity charts annually. The annual report lists the projected capacity utilization for each school and elementary region. The capacity utilization is the projected kindergarten through 12th enrollment divided by the kindergarten through 12th capacity. Schools or regions that are projected to exceed the thresholds listed in the law are identified as constrained to new future residential development. The thresholds for identification as constrained are 105% for elementary schools, 105% for elementary regions, 110% for middle schools, 115% for high schools. These calculations are based on the capacities listed in the most recent board requested capital improvement program. Individual schools or elementary regions that show a capacity utilization less than the percentage noted are considered open for new residential development for purposes of the schools test. Additionally, the adequate public facilities ordinance requires submission of several supplemental items that will be discussed further in this presentation. Before we go into the charts, I'd like to take a moment to just review how to read the school capacity chart. Attachment 2 of the board report. The section of that attachment is shown on the screen. In this example, the constrained schools are indicated in the chart with the letter C, and open schools are left blank. Constrained schools and regions are also shown in red. An elementary school could be constrained to new residential development if the region is closed, and I'll explain this as we get into the elementary chart. So this is the elementary 2021 elementary schools capacity chart. This is again attachment 2 of the board report. The test year for this chart is 2024-25 and reflects capacity utilization rates with the Board of Education requested fiscal year 22 capital budget, capacity projects, and the spring 2020 projections. For the 2021 Apfo school capacity chart, 22 elementary schools are constrained. Also of note, the northern and southeast regions are constrained to new construction based on this projection. And with the closing of these two regions, or the identification of constraint for these two regions, 2 additional elementary schools will be constrained to new residential construction. The 2021 middle school capacity chart. For the 2021 Apfo school capacity chart, 6 middle schools are constrained. The region test does not apply at the middle school level. The middle schools identified as constrained include Burley Manor Middle School, Folly Quarter Middle School, Hammond Middle School, Mount View Middle School, Patapsco Middle School, and Thomas Viaduct Middle School. For the high school capacity chart, this is a new chart required under the 2018 amendments to Apfo. For school year 2024-25, 5 high schools are identified as constrained. Those include Howard High School, Long Reach High School, Marriott's Ridge High School, Mount Hebron High School, and Reservoir High School. Also in that revision to the adequate public facilities ordinance, the requirements were passed to provide additional documentation. Including state and local capacities, date of the last redistricting for each school, a chart showing the portions of projected enrollment increase due to several housing factors, and the capital budget pages showing current and future funding assumptions if a school is shown as open due to a pending project in the capacity chart. Each of these items are included in the board report as attachment 3. The last page in attachment 3 is intended to be the notice to the county council of the schools that have reached 95% capacity utilization and are projected to exceed 110% capacity utilization within the next 5 years. The attachment also includes potential solutions based on the 2020 feasibility study as required by the ordinance. Should you approve the motion as indicated in the report, the council should then be prompted to hold a joint special work meeting. The next steps would be action by the board this evening, hopefully. May 27th is the filing of the school capacity charts with the county council. We move on to June 7th for introduction to the county council, followed by a public hearing and work session. July 1st amendments would be due, and July 6th would be the county council action on the school capacity charts. With that, I'll take any questions you have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Board members, please raise your hand if you have questions. And first one, Ms. Quattroni.
Thank you for your report and the PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully the community at home can understand this complicated APFO a little bit better. My question is comparing last year's report to this year's report and why there's some big differences for projections for year 24. So last year's report to projections for year school year 24-25. For example, Hanover Hills Elementary, or no, Bryant Woods Elementary. Last year was projected to be 100 and, where's the number? 126% over capacity. Now it's projected to be 136% over capacity, which is just unbelievable for an elementary school that's old and has very little flexibility with its space. What accounts for the big differences that we see from last year's report to this year's report going 2 years out in the reporting?
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Catronio, for that question. I think the biggest difference will be attributed to the impacts of the board's approved redistricting in 2019, this 2020 projection that informs this APFO report, or school capacity chart, was the first projection following those new boundaries, implementation of those new boundaries. So specifically at Bryant Woods, looking out into 2024-25, I believe in the board's those new boundaries that were implemented in 2019 or adopted in 2019, implemented in 2020.
We moved
Bryant
downtown
Woods picked
Columbia
up a portion of the downtown Columbia development.
And now there's more going before the planning board next week is increasing the number of apartments for Bryant Woods. And so that's really concerning for that school. And also for the Hanover Hills and Thomas Viaduct grouping, we have sort of the same situation. But there are schools that were not redistricted. For example, Laurel Woods, they were not impacted by redistricting, and that their numbers have a big difference. So is that just because of the apartment turnover?
Laurel Woods is one of our more difficult schools to project enrollment because of the mobility of the population in that area. So I would say that at Laurel Woods, the major difference is the change in just accounting for projection accuracy.
So it is the apartment, it's the apartments that make it difficult. And I do see that with our schools that have a lot of apartments that feed into them, that it is difficult. But my other question, or I guess I just want to elevate it, is that this is the longest time period we've gone without any new capacity since, I think it's 2018 was our last new capacity with the opening of, was it Thomas Viaduct or Hanover Hills, one of them. And now we will have 3 projects coming on board providing capacity. None of them are middle school level. And then after that, we go until I think 2028 when we get Dunlog in an addition for middle school. We don't have any new capacity coming on board again. And this is just, for the years leading up to this, we've always had capacity coming on board, and it's just not happening. And we're going to, with our rate of enrollment, I'm really alarmed for some of our school areas. And the solution that is listed is, you have to put, per the, I guess, the APFO law, like what is the solution to this problem? And we say boundary line adjustments, but that's not really a possibility with some of our areas. There's nowhere to go, especially at the middle school level. So I'm just elevating that as I always do whenever I have the opportunity. Is there any comment from your office about this sort of, you know, I think I think we really need to look at, you know, some of our schools. Perhaps we need to, you know, some of the big developments coming on board, do we need to make planning polygons and put them where there is some capacity? Because I don't see a solution. I'm really concerned about schools like Bryant Woods Elementary, Hanover Hills, Thomas Viaduct. There just doesn't seem to be room to move those students. Any comment from your office, or am I putting you on the spot?
I think there will be opportunities to address some of these things. Obviously, with the capital budget constraints, you know, there are limited opportunities to build our way out of some of these crowding situations. But I think with recent discussions with the county council, with the Hoco by Design moving forward, and now the strategic advisory group for Hoco by Design kicking off this week. And I think with there will be opportunities to come up with some solutions to these problems. And I think you know, we redo our enrollment projections, our long range plan, our CIP. They're evaluated and adjusted every year. So we have many opportunities going
I do want to
forward
thank you for
try
being
to
on
do
that strategic advisory group. I mean, I am serving on Hoco by Design, which is planning development for the next 10 years and ensuring that school capacity is part of that conversation for this very reason. Because you can plan all this density, and you know, if school capacity is not in that same conversation, we're going to be in an even worse predicament. So they've elevated that, and they've formed a strategic advisory group, which is looking specifically at school capacity, and will report back to the Hoco by Design. And Dr. Liu is on that, so we do have board representation, and we have Office of School Planning. So I want to thank you for serving on that. So I just wanted to elevate that. I think that we can say we have new construction as a solution. We can say boundary line adjustments, but we get to a point where that's just not viable. It doesn't make sense. And as we've seen with the last redistricting, we've created some problems that weren't there before. For example, moving Running Brook into Bryant Woods Elementary, and now Bryant Woods is at 136% projection. I'll cede the floor because I could talk for another hour on this.
Dr. Liu, you're next.
Thank you for the presentation and report. So I have a question for you. It's about state and the local capacities of the facilities. So what are the major differences between those two capacities? Because I saw that for some schools, the two numbers are really different.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Liu. It's a different formula. The state's formula takes into account smaller rooms and assigns them a small amount of capacity. It also takes into account rooms used for programs like special needs that we do not take into account. So those are the two main differences. It's a different theory and different methodology for calculating capacity. And those are the two main differences.
Thank you. So which one is more accurate and which one mostly reflect the reality?
In terms of accuracy, they're just two different methodologies. So I don't know that I could say one is more accurate than the other. In terms of reflecting reality, I think if you would speak to, it depends on probably your viewpoint on that question. From the state's perspective, I know they believe that we should be getting more out of some of our facilities than we do. From the local perspective, I think we're all in agreement that we're getting a lot out of our schools right now, and that the capacities, maybe even in some cases, are overstated. So both those questions, I'm sorry, I don't have a concrete answer, but I think both of them, it's a matter of perspective.
Good evening, Dr. Liu. This is Dan Lubley, Director of Capital Planning and Construction. If I may expand a little on Mr. Rogers' answer. Tim, please correct me if I'm wrong. The state-rated capacities, they are reviewed primarily when an addition or a new facility comes online, but they are not reviewed every year.
That's correct.
The local rated capacities, however, as our programs change and regional programs do modifiability, do we not look at individual schools to update the local rated capacity? to reflect those individual programs. So Dr. Liu, that would be one difference between the local rated capacity and state rated capacity is the timing in which they are changed. So again, locally, that would go, as Mr. Rogers pointed out, the perspective on the local level, it could be argued that the local rated capacities do represent more of a realistic representation of the capacities of those schools.
Yeah, thank you. So when the school utilization was calculated, are we using the local capacity or the state one?
We use local.
It's local one, yeah. Because let's say I'm use Glenelg as an example, but local capacity is 1,420, and the state is 944. So if the utilization is 92% using the local level and then using the state capacity, actually it's overcrowded. So, yeah, so my question is whether Glenelg is actually overcrowded or not, because those two numbers are really, really different.
I don't know specifically why the state capacity for Glenelg is much lower than ours. Typically, the state capacity is higher. As you look through the chart and compare the numbers, my guess for Glenelg would be that it doesn't reflect recent, and by recent, I know there hasn't been anything in the most recent 10 or 12 years, but recent updates to the facility itself.
Yeah, and another example is Howard High, because the local capacity is 1,420 and then state is 1,051. And we know that Howard's already overcrowded, and using the state capacity, it'll be even more crowded.
Yeah, I think Howard did have a recent addition. I think it was 12 or 13 years ago. And I would think that capacity doesn't reflect that addition.
Dr. Liu, this is Dan Lubley again, Director of Capital Planning and Construction. I know recently the state has gone through and provided a review of elementary schools. I don't know the last time that they have specifically gone through and looked at our high schools. Our offices can work with our interagency specialist, Ms. Betsy Zins, to specifically request a review of those state rated capacities that you're pointing out, Howard High School and Glenelg, and any other items that we note as anomalies, and we can get back to you on those state rated capacities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Mosley.
Hello, I have two questions. I have a question on your modeling. It's not on the presentation you gave, but was the enrollment held harmless based on the pandemic?
For purposes of the school capacity charts, everything that you're seeing is based on projections developed in the spring of 2020 prior to the impacts of the pandemic.
Okay.
So 2020, school year 21-22 enrollment or school year 20-21 enrollment doesn't apply to this at all.
And you won't be updating these charts within the, like in between chart reviews to account for actual enrollments?
We have no plans to do that.
Okay. And then my other question was, we recently got the information back from our census, and we know that our Howard County population has increased, and there is differences in where the density clusters are across our county. Has your modeling changed at all for that information?
To reflect, well, our projection is updated every year based on newest information from various sources across county and state government. And then part of the art of projecting enrollment is learning about state, local, and regional, and even nationwide trends that would impact that data and impact the historical, the ability of using historical data to project the future. So every year we're looking at information like that to make updates to our projections.
Okay, so you are using some of that census data that's come out to maintain a more accurate model?
In our, again, the projection that you're seeing that informs this chart again, was prior to the census. So it wouldn't inform anything in this particular chart, but it's something we will be taking into account going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Lex. I have one question about the regional definition especially for elementary school. What's the reason we have Columbia East and the West, which is tiny small, 2,800 or 2,500? Is there any in the future we kind of redefine these regions, make them more aligned with each other regions in terms of the student population?
There has not been an effort to reevaluate the regions. We make adjustments when school boundaries change to make sure that we're responsive to recent changes in that area. If it's something that is a concern, we can definitely look at that. I don't know, however, that the size of a region, I don't know that provides any issue in terms of opening or closing or identifying regions or schools as constrained.
Because different combination of schools will change the chart dramatically in terms of the region set, right?
Yeah.
Like individual schools, they're not changing that, but in terms of the regional, for example, if we put some schools which highly overcrowded and put in the other looks not so crowded, that region may be crowded again. So that's my thought. I just wonder what's maybe best combination in terms, look at all the elementary school together and try to, shuffle that boundary a little bit, make sure our school capacity, which is aligned with the development, and then we're not rushing to open the chart again. Just if you can give us some update in the future or have some conversation with the county, I think that will be really helpful.
Okay. Sure, we can look at that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Damasmo.
We still, unfortunately, keep coming back to the same place, which is that our number one issue is that we have a lack of capacity. And we have truly hit the point, I believe, where we can't really redistrict ourselves out of this crisis. I appreciate my colleagues mentioning the development polygons, which is something that I've been trying to advocate for a long time, because we are getting development that's coming in, and as much as we hope that Apfo is going to solve this issue, it clearly is not working. And we are very limited in what our solutions are. We can't generate revenue, and the only thing that is going to help us is to increase capacity. So we either need more money to build more schools, granted we need time to do so, and we would also need land to do so, or do something that none of us, I think, wants to do, which is to increase the portables. So we truly are at a very horrific place in how we are or are not going to be able to provide adequate schools for our students and for our staff. So going to the chart, the elementary school capacity listed does not include pre-K, correct?
That's correct.
So I would appreciate if we could include a column that would include that, because granted, they are much smaller little people, but they are still little people, and they're still going to take up room in these schools. And I think it would give us a better idea, because we really want to know how many humans are going to be, how many bodies are going to be in the school. The other question is the capacity numbers. Remind me again, do they include the students from regional programs or not?
They include not pre-K students, but students in other regional programs that are enrolled at those schools.
So the other ones
Yes.
are in there. Could we, moving forward, and that's another issue where I think we have tried to deal with the capacity, is the movement of different regional programs. And I don't know, and that would be, I think, a discussion that we as the board would have to have with the superintendent and staff who are responsible for those programs. Is that really the best way for us? Because, granted, we have this budding up of the capacity issue with the issue of wanting to present and provide education to students in the way that they need the education presented to them. Because maybe for some of our students, moving them from a school may not necessarily be the best solution. The other thing, has there been any discussion now that the county side is looking at the general plan to have some sort of alignment between our, quote, regions and how they look at the county when they look at development and zoning? Because we always seem to almost be at cross purposes and not talking the same language.
There have been a few recent conversations, by recent I mean in the last 10 years, but that's something we can revisit with the county. I think you're asking about lining up their planning districts.
Yes.
With our regions. Yeah, I'd be happy to take another look at that.
I mean, I think that might, nothing is going to be perfect, but I think that might try to get us closer, because if there is alignment with that and they are approving new construction, or they're approving additions to construction, like if they're doing additions to apartments, and we can align with where our schools are and say, yeah, fine, you want to do that? We don't have enough room for the school, for the students we have now, or if you bring those students in, then we're going to be overcrowded. So I would appreciate us looking down that road to try to get us some leverage when it comes to making sure that we are not contributing to the overpopulation of our schools. Thank you.
Could I just add on to, I just have something specific to say to that. Last year in our presentation from DPZ about this, they said regarding school projections in Apfo, there may be value to bringing back the congruency between allocation areas and school districts, as this will allow for more specific unit caps in more specific areas. That was last year. So I think we should start to have more than just a conversation. So sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to, that was what I was going to bring up.
No, thank you. And I agree with you more than I don't know what you want to do more than a conversation, but I am willing to stand with you to do that.
Okay, I will go Ms. Marlowe first. Ms. Marlowe, you go.
Thank you. Thank you for the time and effort you put into these projections and this work. One of the things that is clear to anyone looking at it is that we have insufficient capacity. So we need to start looking for solutions outside the box. One of the ones that I've heard before, and I would like to bring to the forefront, is the possibility that moving forward, we change the template or the model school and the size of the model school that we have. So we have currently 3 projects going online. The next projects that come forward will be like new elementary school, 43, 44, and 45. I think now is the time that we need to be planning for larger capacity schools. And I don't know when we can have a conversation with the administration about how to move that forward, but I think we need to move that forward at this point.
Ms. Mallory, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I completely concur. I've brought that to the attention of the board several times, but our time has been devoted to such urgent issues, such as redistricting and capital budgets and allocation of funding, that I firmly believe this board needs to take that under consideration and have some firm statement of what dictates that in the future, because we know all the challenges that are associated with land acquisition and how we maximize the space as we allocate dollars for the future. And I can give you some analysis of that when we have the conversations as you project out future schools and money that can be saved in the long run by doing something like that. So I believe that we should establish a process to bring that forward in a thoughtful way for discussion with the board.
With that, can we maybe add it to the next quarterly agenda? Because I think we need to do it sooner than later, so that when we get to the point of planning, because planning is so far out into the future, but this past time we found that we were kind of behind the 8 ball, particularly with high school 13, that we couldn't possibly expand the footprint or the design of the building outside our template without excessive cost. And I think now is the time that we really need to move that discussion forward. So I'm hoping that we can work together to do that. But all of that aside, I move approval of the school capacity chart and attached supplemental data for submittal to the Howard County Council.
Second.
Okay, do we have other
Ms.
questions from
Mosley?
other board members? Yeah,
Was that Ms. Mosley who made the second?
Yes,
Yes.
it was me.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to vote?
and I want to weigh in this topic. I think it just be pretty brief. I think what Ms. Marlowe said, like new school model should be come on. I agree with that. I think last time we talked about this, we said we don't have time or because the funding formula does not support that. I think when you think about that again, it's really, we're not building small schools and we're growing faster than what we have. So I hope that will be come online when next time we need to build a new elementary school. And the same, or have a capacity for expansion, like connect to the old building, have some part of annexation. The other one, I think, it will be the development polygon. I think that idea, especially think about the Fulton Elementary School. Right now, they're like 110 or something. I just see there's huge development there. I don't know where we're putting there because they'll crush the neighboring several schools. I think we need to have really creative solution, let's say that. And then we need to kind of get that information out earlier before they begin to build. I don't want we come to they build a school, they expect to go to school, then we district them. I think that will be a bad message for the new owners and a bad message for school. If we say, okay, because we know you will be overcrowding schools which it is supposed to go, we have neighboring schools which close, maybe a little farther away, but they have capacity. And we need that information as soon as possible, just before they break ground. I think that's another information. We talked about this a lot before. I hope that will get out and for our planning department. The other information I think we talk about for pre-K, if we really don't have capacity, for pre-K, we may have like out-of-box discussion as we had before. Maybe pre-K, we can rent some facility center in community center, and that probably help us to find some capacity as well. That's just 3 comments. I hope we're working in this direction because we see this is a huge problem in terms of overcrowding.
Yeah.
If we're not preparing for that, I think we'll come to this same problem every year. It's difficult.
They're very appropriate and timely instructive direction to provide to me because I've been wanting to engage in those conversations, but these other things have gotten in the way of that discussion. That's no excuse. But if you just understand mathematically in terms of efficient and effective use of resources, if we were to increase the capacity of our schools by an algorithm of, say, like 200, over the course of time, instead of building 5 schools, we may only need to build 4 schools, if you look at that mathematically. And so that's another efficient use of resources. And there's no literature, I mean, just to kind of, whet the appetite for this, there's no literature that supports the fact of children receiving a lesser education in a larger school. We would still adhere to our same tenets of class size and a variety of staffing issues, but understanding those 2 dynamics, it behooves us to have that conversation with everything else of which we're trying to manage. And I bring the main point home. We're having challenges with acquiring land to be able to build all these additional schools at a smaller capacity. So I believe that is a very important move for our board to make and consider, and I will take that back to our staff and bring some preliminary conversations at the appropriate time and on the quarterly agenda where you want to do that. But thank you for encouraging that and providing an opportunity to do so, sir.
Thank you. I think just one more comment, right, about the small footprint of the land we're available, right? I think we need to go high rising. Unfortunately, that's the direction we need to go. Otherwise, we'll build small, tiny schools again.
Right.
Right? So think about that. And I hope we're moving to that direction.
Yes, sir. Planning, did you get all those comments from Dr. Wu Dan? We'll go back and review the tape, but I'll get all those. I didn't write all those down, Dr. Wu. We'll get
Yes,
those.
sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Quattroni.
More on with the development polygon, we can do it with more precision. I think this widespread redistricting, sometimes we do create more other issues, unintended consequences. And I think that if we are able to just move a polygon, or we see a large development coming on board, we can put that development into a school that has capacity. And I think it just makes sense at this point as one of our, as an option. Also with Kerwin, I mean, we're going to have to
Right.
expand our pre-K, and that is really worrisome because we don't have the room to do that. So I do like this, you know, I know that there's been discussions about partnering with community
Right.
entities to free up some capacity.
But you just answered the question I was going to respond to Dr. Wu, but I didn't want to belabor the point, is that there will be a natural conversation that will occur as we unpack Kerwin and the expectations associated with it. One is obviously the pre-K initiative, but let us remind ourselves as we unpack that unlike the initiative for kindergarten, which was a few years ago, there was expectations of expanding our capacity of brick and mortar and relocatables to accommodate that. We had a major lift as far as staffing that with our teachers' ratios, as well as then para-educators. So there was a very expensive initiative. There's a different implementation model in place for pre-K that leverages the Head Start programs with private providers, with the public school providers. So the burden does not necessarily fully rest with the public school system, but the goal associated with Kerwin as a driver for pre-K for all is a part of that, but with a different level of delivery, not fully with the burden of the school system having all of that. So good comment as well.
Okay, I don't see other hands raised. Ms. Hanks, can you call the vote?
Yes, we have a motion by Ms. Mallow and a second by Ms. Mosley to approve the school capacity charts and attach supplemental data for submittal to the Howard County Council. Ms. Catronio.
Yes.
Ms. Delmont Small.
Yes.
Dr. Liu.
Yes.
Ms. Mallow.
Yes.
Ms. Mosley.
Yes.
Ms. Watts.
Yes.
Dr. Wu.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.